What is going on, JP?
How you doing, Ashby?
Doing good. Welcome back to Rounding the Bases. How you feeling?
Um, that could go on the whole show about that. We better stay away from the how you feeling part.
Take up all
That,
our
that
time.
could be a long answer. No, I'm feeling great. How about you?
I'm feeling great. It's almost the weekend.
That's the great part about this show. Every time we do it, it's almost a weekend.
You know what? It keeps happening that way, doesn't
Yeah, every time.
it?
In a couple of
Well, we
weeks,
got a
we
lot.
might, we might have to change that when they start playing some Thursday, Friday, Saturday series.
You're right. Well, I mean, we could still do it on Thursday, but I think we'd be competing with Clemson baseball and
And I'll probably
might.
be there, so that might be a problem. I have
Oh
done them from there
goodness.
before, though.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Live with JP at the venue?
No, I've done some baseball shows there from live at the venue from right outside the press box there. Just take my little contraption and set my phone up in it and roll.
Don't know where my invite was for this, but that's all
This was
right.
a long time ago. I didn't even know you,
Okay,
man. So you're
fair
always
enough.
invited.
I appreciate it. Well, before we get started, we want to thank our new sponsor, Shorty and Goose's Driving School. Shorty and Goose's Driving School is your one stop driving shop. They have many years of experience and pride themselves on being a small family business rather than just a business. They offer everything, including permit testing, first time drivers training courses, driver's license testing, and defensive driving courses to lower insurance costs and point reductions. Call or text Freddie at 843-495-0741 to find out how Freddie and Liz can help you.
And I can vouch for those guys. I sent my daughter there. They will, if you got a kid that needs to do whatever they have to do before they get their driver's license, give him a call. He will take care of you.
And I told JP the other day, I mean, I'm 21 years old. I've been driving for 6 years, and I think I still may need to go to driving school with Shorty and Goose.
These days you have to do something before you can get your driver's license. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, he did it with my daughter. Matter of fact, he came over here. He came to my house one day, picked her up from my house, and took her to do whatever they had to do, and brought her back home. And that he's not a stranger to me, so I didn't let my daughter go off with some stranger. So let's just get that
Crazy
out.
timing. My little brother's taking his driver's test tomorrow, and he has not gone to driving school, so should be interesting.
Yeah, we didn't have to do that when I was younger. They just threw us in the car and said, "Go do it." All
Well,
we had to do was
South Carolina is different too because where I'm from, like you just go the day you turn 16, you get your full license. It's so weird to me that there's all these steps here. I don't
That's
know.
the way it was when I was younger. As a matter of fact, we got our day license when we were 15, and when we turned 16, it automatically turned into a full license.
Yeah, I
Now you
had
got to
none of
be
that.
16 to have the day license, if I'm not mistaken. And my kid got some kind of waiver where hers was a full license before she was, you know, a year early. So I didn't tell her that for about 6 months, but
I think if I was 16 in South Carolina, my parents would be very grateful that I had a day license and not a full license at age 16. But
and
anyway, welcome back. Since we last talked, Clemson baseball has picked up 4 wins. They're 4 for 4 in the last week, including a sweep at Cal. JP, how important was that to be a sweep, going on the road that far away and then still coming back and getting a midweek win?
hey, let's make sure we throw this out there. We both predicted sweeps. I was not feeling good about that, about the sixth inning Friday night in game one, but they came back, made us look good, put the boot on their throat Saturday. I didn't really get to watch Sunday. I had something else I had to do, but yeah, you go out west, man. It looked like they kind of got over a little bit of jet lag there during that game Friday, and came back and did what they needed to do. They just keep finding ways to win despite not really hitting the ball really well. Um, you know, I can't overstate how impressive it is that this team is 30-5. They've won 5 in a row. they're hitting 278 as a team. I don't even think that's in the top 130 nationally.
It's I actually put this down today. I think it's 131 nationally.
I mean that's crazy. They're averaging just over one home run per game. That doesn't even put them in the top 120. I don't think they're in the top 20.
21.
I don't think they're in the top 120 in slugging percentage. But they do have a great approach at the plate, and they're patient and they take their walks. So their own base percentages is actually ranks in the top 40 or something like that. They're really good at scoring runs. That ranks in the top 30 or 40. Um, so it's kind of a weird kind of deal, but it looks like they got a couple of guys that are starting to come out of it. Hopefully they'll keep it up. Colin Priest had a big weekend at Cal, kept it up again last night. He had half the team's hits. It's only two, but still had half the team's hits. Um, Pano had a really good week before last night. I think he hit over 500 last week, if I'm remembering right. So hopefully those two guys will start to come out of it a little bit. But yeah, it was good to see them go take care of business, against a team that they probably should have swept. I mean, I just don't think Cal's very good. Anybody that watched any of those three games, you can tell they don't consider baseball very important. Just look at the production level. You got the one camera all weekend. Heck, on Saturday, they didn't even have a score bug. We're talking about ACC baseball. I don't know what the heck we're doing here, but that's a team Clemson should have swept, and they went out there and took care of business.
I agree. And I thought it was so interesting too. Like it's felt like they've been gone for about 6 weeks because I think I got so used to them having home series that oh my goodness, it also makes you so grateful for how awesome our production team and camera crew and everything is at Clemson. Because this past series, it made me realize like I'm so glad Clemson prioritizes baseball in that way, the way that it does, and I'm excited to have them home for that reason.
It does feel like they've been going a while. I was there last night, and I was thinking to myself, it's been a while since I've been here, and it'd been a couple of weeks almost, but there's a lot of fans that don't realize that those games streamed on the ACC Network Extra, the home team's responsible for the production. They think some fans think it's an ACC Network production. That's not how it works. Like those games played at Doug Kingsmore, and you're watching them on the ESPN app. Those are Clemson productions, and and this is not going to sound. The way I'm going to say this is let's just say watching those games regularly has spoiled, Clemson fans. They sometimes they don't realize how good they got it till they start watching some of these away games. And because I believe Clemson's production team is as good as it gets. I mean, when you need a review, they've pretty much got every angle on every play. You weren't going to be able to review anything in that series at Cal over the weekend because they had the one camera angle and you couldn't see squat.
What you saw is what you got pretty much with that series. Yeah.
I mean,
if
you can tell the emphasis Clemson puts on baseball. And yeah, I know every now and then, I got in an argument with somebody on Twitter Friday night because he was talking about, well, Clemson only has one camera. That's happened at baseball one time this year, if I'm remembering right. One time. And it only happens when they have three or more sports going on at the same time. You only got so many feeds, and especially if basketball or lacrosse or basketball or gymnastics is going on at the same time, those sports take up a lot of feeds. But that's I kept trying to tell him, hey man, this ain't that. I understand it if that's what it is, but this is not that. It's going to be like this all weekend long. You've never seen that at Clemson. You might see it a couple of times during the season. Again, I only remember it happening one time during the season, and before that game, Clemson put it in their press release, one camera angle. So they kind of warned everybody. But yeah, I do think a lot of fans don't. I'm not saying everybody, but I do think some fans think the ACC network or the ACC or ESPN is responsible for those broadcasts. They just air the stream. It's the home venue that's kind of responsible for putting those on. And that's why a lot of times when you see a game like that like at the minor league park in North Augusta. They played against was Georgia State or Georgia Southern. I get them confused.
Yeah, I think Georgia
Last week,
Southern.
that's why sometimes at those minor league fields you'll get a lower quality production because it's at a minor league field and there's nobody. They don't get used as much or watched as much or viewed as much. There's not as much, let's just say, money and effort put into it. But yeah, Clemson does a top notch job with those things. And last weekend, just it was. I saw a lot of people voicing frustration. Sometimes you don't know how good you got it till you have to watch something like that for 3 days in a row.
Yeah, and I think it's a whole nother topic that we do televise so many different sports too. I mean, you mentioned basketball and lacrosse and gymnastics and all this stuff, and I think people don't understand how much effort Clemson puts into prioritizing all that and having all that on ACC network within one day. Other changes in DKS since the Tigers have been gone. Beer garden. JP, you saw it in its first night last night. What were your takeaways? Was there anybody rowdy? Was it pretty much the same? Were people in the bullpen getting taunted? What was going on?
There were over 5,000 people at a game last night. I've not seen that many people at a midweek game for a lower level opponent in some time. It was a very good crowd. The official attendance was over 5,000, but it was pretty packed. It was packed all the way down the third base line there, down that fence back there where the beer garden is. And, let's remember Eric Bakich called it a beer garden before the season. So I'm not terming that phrase here. Um, they had it out there. They had a little place behind home plate too, but I talked to a bunch of people there last night. I only come across one that was really dead set against it. And oddly enough, he was drinking a beer. He dead set against alcohol sales. And he said, I know how odd this is going to sound with me sitting there holding this. But yeah, it went off without a hitch. I talked to one of the girls running the concession. They were running one of the beer stands there, and I watched it from the press box. You could tell it wasn't like long lines, but they had steady traffic all night. I don't think she had a whole lot of time to sit there with nothing to do. But yeah, I thought it went off without a hitch. So much so that after the game, Eric Backus said he didn't even notice they were selling it yet last night. He thinks the difference is you're gonna start really seeing the difference on the weekends. But I understand some of those inside the fan base who are hesitant and reluctant. I'm 50 years old. I'm a little resistant to change myself. But I believe that you can have the beer sales and still maintain your family-like environment that Clemson prides itself on. I think the two are able to coexist. And Eric Backus said the same thing last night, and he said the reason why was because of the people in the community. He has that much faith in the people in the community. He don't think there are going to be a lot of issues, and I don't either.
I mean, I can vouch the same. I was at softball last night, and it was very similar. Pretty much close to sold out crowd on what was last night, a Wednesday night. And I think it's if it's something that is bringing people to Clemson sports and people that are excited to watch and excited to cheer, especially on midweek games like that, then I think just at that level, that's so exciting. Because, Back has just talked over and over again about how he wants to build it up and have 10,000 people at a game. And I think that's a crucial step for getting it started. I think another thing for helping that fan base grow is clearly continuing to win, which they've done. And I was glad to see them not have a Coastal Carolina situation last night where just came off a big sweep, long trip home, and, struggling to hit, and you still find a way to win. And I think that was in large part to Jacob Jarrell, who has been so good recently and didn't he have 2 of the 4 hits last night?
He had 2. Priest had the other 2.
Priest had 2. Yeah. So I don't know. I think we're about halfway through the ACC play after this weekend. I think it's such great timing that guys like that are heating up.
They need them to start heating up because they're kind of, struggling to come up with that clutch hit sometimes. They are manufacturing some runs. Don't get me wrong, and enough as to where they're able to pull off some of these wins. But when you start looking at some of the numbers, the hitting numbers with runners on base, runners in scoring position, like last night, it was putrid. I think Sunday I saw they were 1 for 10 or 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position. I think that kind of speaks volumes, though, about the mental makeup of this team that they're able to be, what is it, 31-5 at this point now, or whatever it is, and have struggled to come up with some of those clutch hits of late. Um, Luke Gaffney's kind of cooling off a little bit, but I do think we have seen some signs that Priest is coming out of it and Pano's coming out of it, and they need, like I said earlier, they need those guys to come out of it because you're gonna have to start getting more, be better with runners on base than they have been for the most part the past couple of weeks or so. I know they're still finding ways to win, but once you start getting into the postseason, that's when you're gonna need, you're gonna have to be better in the clutch moments. And I think they've got some guys in this lineup that can be good in the clutch. Sometimes baseball happens, and this guy's in a slump or this guy's in a slump or all these guys are slumping at the same time or whatever it is. And I think they're just kind of going through one of those valleys that most teams tend to go through every season. You got your peaks and your valleys, and as far as the clutch hitting goes, they're going a little bit of a valley right now, except Jacob Jarrell. He had a couple of big ones last night. Just so happened nobody was on base either time he hit one of those bombs, but they were big ones. The first one came when the game was tied 2-2, and then he hit his second one in the eighth inning to give them another insurance run.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting. We've talked about the identity of this team, and you talked about that manufacturing runs. We said it earlier, but they're 133rd nationally in batting average, 121st in home runs per game, and also in the 130s in slugging percentage. But they're 33rd in the country in runs still, and 6th nationally in walks, and we lead the country in sac flies. At what point does that become the identity of this team? And does that need to shift for them to make a run in the postseason?
I think once you get through the halfway point of the season, you kind of are who you are. I think, to me, the identity of this team would be one that, they're not going to rely on the long ball. They're not going to be the best hitting team most nights, but they're gonna be patient at the plate. They're gonna make you throw strikes, and if you don't, they're gonna take their walks. They don't have any problems, you know, getting aggressive and swiping a base when they need to, or laying down the bunt in the right situation. Um, Eric Backett just kind of pushed a lot of buttons this season with a team that isn't hitting a lot of home runs, isn't hitting really well with runners on base of late, and they're still finding ways to push across runs. I think the sacrifice that being so good at the sacrifice flies is a big thing. That means when you do have a runner on third, you're at least putting the ball in play, and you're not sitting up there watching strike three or striking out swinging. Because we've talked about it many times. I think this team has a good approach at the plate most times. It's just not translated into hits in some of the bigger moments. But they still kind of find ways to get it done. I think that's one of the most impressive things about this team. And to me, the grittiness, that would be the identity for me. Just how gritty they are and never being out of the fight.
I think the grittiness comes from the pitching side too. I wish there was a way for me to see how many, jams we've gotten out of this year, and it was really good to see that happen again this weekend and last night some too. I think Drew Titsworth was along with Jacob Jarrell last night, the MVP. He or his stats. I think he had 4.1 innings, 7 strikeouts, no walks, no hits. How important is that and the bullpen for that grittiness that you're talking about?
I think the bullpen's been the strength of the team, probably, or the biggest strength of this team so far. And I thought that performance from Titsworth came at just the right time for him because he's kind of been a little up and down lately after such a good start. The 4 1/3 innings, career high. 7 strikeouts, career high. Um, just one more piece in that bullpen that Bakich can turn to, along with guys like Reed Garris, who's been so good. Lucas Malstead, who coming out of the weekend was leading the country in saves. Um, you know, BJ Bailey's been so good in that bullpen. He's starting now, but he's been a big part of it. There's been a bunch of guys. Dvorsky's been mostly, he's had some rough patches here and there, but he's been pretty solid for the most part. I know I'm forgetting somebody. Let's see who it is here. I thought I had this thing pulled up here, but I guess I don't. Oh, Joe Allen's been pretty good. I knew I was forgetting somebody. He's been another big piece for them. So I mean, they've got some pieces out there, and with a guy like Malstead, you could use him more than once on a weekend. But I thought that performance by Titsworth last night, again, I thought it came at the perfect time, and yeah, he would definitely be co MVP for me.
I agree. And it's looking like the bullpen is about to get even better. We're hoping. Talon Bell came out last night and let me pull up his started against Gardner Webb. Ended up having 2 innings pitched, 1 hit, 2 walks, no runs, and a strikeout. What did you think of that performance, and how do you hope to see him improving going forward?
You can tell they're taking it very slowly with him.
Yeah,
He's made what, 3 starts now? Is it 3 or 4? 3.
I think
His
3. This
first
was his third.
his first one he was right at 40 pitches. His third one he's still right at only 50. So they've not moved it up very much. Eric Baggett talked a little bit last night how they were taking it real slow with Brandon Bennett, and that didn't help. He's back out again. So they're being extremely cautious with him. You'd like to see him get up, that pitch count expanded, over the next couple of weeks, and then he really be cut loose for the stretch run. But I thought he had a couple of tough breaks defensively. They kind of misplayed what should have been a double play ball, and there was another. Um, I think it might have been I can't remember if it was the first. There was another one there that kind of got misplayed. I think it might have been an error. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but he's showing flashes, but I don't think I think we're seeing a freshman who's still trying to find his footing. He had a couple of walks, one in the first, one in the third. He walked the last guy he faced. But if you really sit there and watch his stuff, it's electric. When he settles in and finds that groove and really gets on top of his command, he's got the makeup to be a dominant pitcher at this level. Not overpowering necessarily, but dominant. His stuff's that good.
What do you think his ceiling is this year? Do you think they'll have him on a pitch count for the rest of the year? Does that depend on his performance? Where do you think do we think it 3 innings, 4 innings? How far do you think he would go at this point?
That's a good question because we're already seeing them take it extremely slow with him. They've already had one guy, the freshman Bennett, have a setback with something. He we might not. Listening to Eric Backus last night, I'm not convinced we see him again this year. Didn't say he was shut down. Don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm just kind of reading between the lines. They said they were going to be very cautious with him, but I think you want to do the same with Talon Bell. You're not in a position where you need to rush him along. I think a month from now, when you really are getting set for your postseason run, you'd like to see him be able to at least, go throw 60. I don't think that's unreasonable. if he can give you 60 pitches, depending on how his efficiency that day, he can go 3-4 innings for you. I think he can be a key cog out of that bullpen. Well, maybe not a key cog, but a reliable piece in that bullpen, down the stretch and into the postseason. You could use him as a left-handed specialist, the way we saw him use McGovern to a degree at times last year, and he was so good at. Um, I think there's a bunch of different ways you could use him. I don't expect to see him starting or anything like that this year. It's fun to think about what he might be able to do next year, but this year I think he's gonna, if he gets to a point where he can throw more pitches and they take the leash off of him a little bit and let him start coming out of the bullpen on the weekends. I think he's a guy that can help them. And you just touched on it a minute ago. They're hoping to get 2 more back here soon. Jacob McGovern's been out since the middle of March. He just threw a simulated game a couple of days ago. Back said Michael Gillen threw a simulated game a couple of weeks ago. The last time we were talking about, we were wondering when he was going to do that. Once you start throwing simulated games, you're getting close. I think when Bakich mentioned that Talon Bell had thrown a simulated game, he started the next week. And that was obviously about a month ago. And I remember saying at the time, probably about a month for Gillen. And it might be, I don't like to tap myself on the back or anything, but anyway,
not to toot your own horn, but
yeah, talking about a guy that can help you if he gets, even if he's only 3/4 of the way back. You're talking about a guy that was just downright dominant for 2 years. Granted, it was in the Big East. He was at Seton Hall, but this is a guy that's he's got a sub-2 ERA and 60-something innings pitched. He's walked less than 20 guys. I mean, he was a closer for them, and that when you use a guy as a closer, he's one of your most dependable guys. You kind of put him out there in some middle relief as maybe a setup guy for a Garris or a Malstead or whoever else you might be wanting to go to that night. This bullpen's already, again, been the strength of this team pretty much for most of the season. You add a couple more guys to it, especially if you could get a guy like McGovern back to where he was last year. Finding out he's been dealing with some shoulder soreness and stuff kind of explains some of the up and down we've seen from him this year. But you get him back to where he was last year, and you get Michael Gillen in here ready for the postseason. Golly, man, that's a heck of a staff you're working with.
I agree. We talked at the beginning of the season so much about how they were the group with the most to prove. We said we've seen guys like Cam Canarella, and we thought Dom Listy would be really dominant. And this was the group with the most questions that we had. And as of now, I think they're the ones with the least questions. We know what you're going to get from a Lucas Malstead, from a Reed Garris. And I think when you're struggling to hit, knowing that you have that is such insurance. And I don't think they win a lot of those close games or comeback games without them. But in addition to that, I think it's also was good to see some great starting pitching performances too, or better. How did you feel about BJ Bailey and Ethan Darden's better week?
I was particularly glad to see Darden kind of bounce back. He's had 3 rough weeks in a row. And, knowing a little bit about him and how hard he is on himself when he does not perform well, I imagine he's had a rough few weeks. I think Darden's one of those guys when he's just missing a little bit. There'll be days where he gets hit, and we saw that against Georgia Tech. I thought he had some tough luck against Wake Forest, but love seeing them get him some runs in the first inning. Take the pressure off, just let him go out there and pitch, and that's what he did. I forget what his numbers were, but he was really solid all day long. I was kind of hoping they'd let him go to one more inning and throw the complete game, but they didn't. I think he went 6 innings, if I remember right. But it was really good to see him with a bounce back performance. You just kind of keep getting what you get from Canuck. And then BJ Bailey, he's kind of one of the unsung heroes of this team this year. I know he ended up giving up 3 earned runs. He caught some bad luck there on the tail end of his outing. Left a couple runners on base when he went out and they came around to score. But he gave you 5+, struck out 4 more hitters. I mean, his ERA is 1.36 this year. For so long we're worried about the Sunday starter, and 2 weeks in a row now they've got that figured out.
Seems like that question has been answered, which I think that's what we're finding out more and more is we're having more things answered, and who steps up, who fills roles that are open, and that's been fun to watch. Looking forward, got Stanford.
Here's one more number for you on the pitching that I was
Okay.
looking for while you were talking about the bullpen. Left on base percentage. That measures the effectiveness of a pitcher in stranding runners on base. A minimum of 7 innings pitched. Reed Garris, 100%. BJ Bailey, 90.1%. Mostad, 84.6. Joe Allen, 75, and Titsworth, 72. Those first 3, that's like elite level status. Some of those guys, they just seem to get better when guys are on base. You compare it, heck, this Canucks is not even, he's down at 66.7. So, I mean, those guys are getting it done at a higher level even than he is. So, I mean, just gives you a little insight to exactly how good that staff's been when runners are on base.
Yeah, I think that's when they're at their best, believe it or not, and a reason they've gotten a lot of wins so far this weekend, trying to pick up 3 more. Tigers are coming back home for the first series at DKS in 3 weeks. JP, what do you think are going to be the keys to beating the Stanford team?
Keep getting what you got out of the starting pitching the last weekend. I think that's a big one. You'd like to see them, again, be better than they've been with runners in scoring position. But to me, one of the biggest things will be staying patient at the plate, taking your walks, and manufacturing runs. Because again, we've talked about it a bunch tonight. This team's had a hard time hitting with runners on base, hitting with runners in scoring position. So the more guys you get on base, the better opportunity you have at pushing some across, particularly when you're not hitting the ball well. Taking your walks is even that much more important. So being patient at the plate, getting what you got from those starting pitchers last weekend, because I don't think you want to get into a slugfest with these guys. I mean, you're just not, and I'm not saying that because this is some potent entity, because anything about Stanford is just more about how
We've
Clemson's
been
playing.
hitting.
Yeah, more about how Clemson's hitting the ball in this moment. Be nice to see them bust out a couple of games and have a couple of games where they score 7, 8 runs and see some guys start to really come out of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't be upset if we had 2 or 3 games that were similar to that Saturday game. I would not be mad because that
was fun.
Oh yeah, it takes the pressure off your pitcher, takes the pressure off everybody the rest of the game. I would love to see that in DKS this weekend. I'm picking another sweep. I'm going with it. We picked it last week. It worked for us. I felt good about it. I'm not taking credit for it, but I am. What do you think? How many wins do you think Tigers come up with this weekend?
I'm going with the sweep too, because this is a Stanford team that's kind of struggling. They got off to a hot start and they've been kind of putrid of late. I wish I could remember where I saw those numbers at earlier, but they've not played well of late.
They're 18-12 and 5-10 in ACC play, and they're 6-4 away.
Yeah, I think they've kind of been really bad of late. They got off to a hot start and they've kind of cooled off dramatically here over the past 2 or 3 weeks. So we're talking about a Clemson team that's top 5. This Stanford team, I know they were ranked at one time. They're not ranked anymore. They've fallen all the way out of the rankings now with this kind of downward trend they've been on. So you're playing at home. This is a team you should handle. Um, I'm I'm going with another sweep. I think by the time the weekend's over, Clemson's won 8 straight, um, and then they'll have a week off to get ready for Louisville.
Completely agree. Well, it's going to be a good one to watch. I'm excited about it, and we'll be back next week to talk all about it.
Absolutely. Right here next Thursday, 7 p.m.
Same time, same place. I want to thank our sponsor, Shorty and Goose's Driving School. Again, call or text Freddie at 843-495-0741 for all your driving school needs. Make sure you follow the Clemson Insider so we can keep you posted on all things Clemson baseball. Thank you so much, JP, and we'll see you next week.
Next Thursday, 7 p.m.